From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
This is the Hamilton Place Strategies Macrocast with our friends from Markets Policy Partners. Every Friday, we take a look at the big economic policy and data stories of the week, and we look at what to expect in the week ahead. My name is Tony Fratto, founding partner at HPS. You can check out Hamilton Place Strategies at www.hamiltonps.com. We also tweet at HPS Insight, and I tweet at Tony Fratto. I got to know John Fagan during his time at the Markets Policy Room in the U.S. Treasury Department, and Brendan Walsh when he was a senior analyst at Discovery Capital covering global financial institutions. John and Brendan founded Markets Policy Partners, where they provide independent financial market analysis for public and private sector audiences. You can find them at www.marketspolicy.com. It's Friday, July 5th, and this is an Independence Day weekend and Jobs Day edition of the Macrocast. John Fagan, unfortunately, he's off in the mountains and unreachable today, and so we're giving him the week off, but Brendan Walsh is with us. Matt McDonald, my partner here at HPS, a founding partner at HPS, is with us. And among all the other things he does, he's also the creator of the long-running HPS Jobs Day fact sheet at MacMcD HPS. You can find him there, and you can find the Jobs Day fact sheet, which he'll be tweeting out this morning as well. Hey, guys, why don't we keep this, since it's a holiday weekend, let's keep this relatively short today, and we'll let people get on with their weekends. But we did have the big NFP non-farm payrolls Jobs Day report today. Matt, you want to give us the headline numbers on what we saw? Yeah,
it was a good report. Employers added 224,000 jobs in June. The May numbers, which were weak, were revised down just a smidge, but it wasn't really material, I would say. And then we saw the unemployment rate bump up from 3.6 to 3.7, but that's still kind of an embarrassment of riches. We're talking about a 50-year low in the unemployment rate. And we saw because of that bump in the unemployment rate, what was contributing to that was more people coming into the labor force, which is on balance a good thing. So overall, it was a strong headline number, and it was driven by the right mechanics. So it was really good, especially this deep into a recovery.
Brendan, what's your take on this? How are markets reacting to it?
Matt's point on the unemployment rate was really important. It kind of just rounded up, but it was for a good reason. More people are entering the workforce and looking for jobs, not the number of unemployed massively increasing. The other thing, a couple little nuggets I found. On the positive side, construction companies hired 21,000, so it's a decent sign for the housing sector, which has kind of been languishing for the recent time. And then manufacturers also surprisingly added 17,000 jobs. But on the negative side, retailers keep losing jobs, so 6,000. But
that seems more of a more structural than secular, though, right?
100%. It's entirely the bricks and mortar going to Amazon.
The other piece, Tony, that I neglected to mention at the front, which is important and everybody's tracking at this point in the cycle, is that wages continue to rise. And that is also really good, and we're seeing that continued tightening in the labor market manifest itself through to wages for workers.
Yeah, 3-4 years ago, when wages were kind of languishing in the low 2% on an annual basis, the Fed set basically a 3% target. Said if we could get there, it would be pretty good. And now we're there, and now we're talking about cutting. It's an interesting.
It is a weird. I definitely want to get into cutting. Yeah, wages were. Definitely again above 3. They were 3.1% in this report year over year. Market expected 3.2, but again, like we're these are a little bit volatile, and we're in the ranges. So talk about cuts. Brendan, the last couple of weeks, we were talking about market expectations for rate cuts. The July cut, 100% priced in. Future cuts, pretty high priced in. And I tweeted out this morning after the numbers came out that Jay Powell's great again. The numbers, the data was robust, and And I asked people to make the case for, in this environment, make the case for a rate cut. What's it case for a rate cut? Now, I still think we're looking at a July rate cut, but it gets harder to make the case, doesn't it?
Yeah. So today, the expectations changed moderately. So we went from 100% in July to about 90%. But the big one is for a 50 basis point cut in the July meeting, we went from about 25% odds to now down to 10, which I think that's logical. I suppose if you're going to make the case for the cut, you focus on two things. One is the fact that inflation is still low. We're at 1.6% core on the PCE. And then the other one is simply the market, where we have a lot of the yield curves inverted. The market has really priced it. And if you don't do it, you risk a market sell-off.
Well, I think that's absolutely and that's absolutely the case. And you wonder. I mean, you wonder if is that a reason to not make the cut or to make the cut rather?
Well, we did QE, and the whole point of QE is to make markets go up. So you kind of made your bed. So I suppose you have to pay attention to the markets now. If
that's
it seems like that's getting, you made.
Yeah, it seems like that's getting far away from the it's away from the Fed's mandate. I mean, we could make the case that they haven't made they're not hitting their inflation target. And heard a lot of people saying, well, that's the case. When I asked the question, that's the case, is they're still below their inflation target. But maybe we should do a whole separate show on whether it makes sense to be so focused on how they've been missing the inflation target. But
I read a report he was a former Fed governor and Fed watcher, and in it he mentioned why we could get a cut in this summertime. And one of the top 3 or 4 reasons was a market sell-off, where when I knew him 5-6 years ago, that would have been utter sacrilege. The Fed doesn't pay attention to the markets, but we've gotten to that point where it's just kind of accepted that they do pay attention to the market.
One thing that's interesting in the context of both the Fed and then the jobs report, and I'm gonna hat tip Ernie Tedeschi for his analysis on this, but is the degree to which demography is applying downward pressure on rates, at least the 10-year.
Yep.
And
inflation.
It is, and it's super interesting to look at the jobs report through that lens as well, because yes, a 200,000 plus jobs number is a great headline number, but on some respect is that the bigger challenge that we face in the economy is the aging of the workforce. And what we saw also is that the labor force participation rate holding steady, that is a big deal and something that is going to be the challenge for the next decade to come. So it's interesting to see where you think about it, the impact of those changes on the Fed side and how they're thinking about rates, and then also on the job market side and how, especially from a fiscal policy side, how do you incentivize people to stay in the labor force? And those are that's a big change in how we think about the economy and what we're looking at in the coming years. And it's something that both the Fed side and then the policymaker side have to be thinking about.
Yeah, I saw a great scatter plot 2 days ago, and it was simply on the y-axis, your rate of inflation, on the x-axis, the number of elderly you have in the economy. And it's you don't have to be a genius to look at it. Old economies have very low inflation.
Well, and here's the interesting thing about that is that I agree with you. I would say that that you don't have to be a genius to understand that, and yet at the same time, it is a very different mental model than we have used for decades. Because
and I don't know what you do about it.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing: is that look, over a period of, I think back to when my parents were psyched about a 12% interest rate on their mortgage in the 80s, when the baby boomers were in their prime purchasing years and the demand for borrowing was comparatively high, and you could do worse than understand some of these rate cycles through that lens of the baby boomer impact on the economy. And we just haven't had, within the kind of generational memory, we just haven't really had to confront this. And looking at what Japan is doing in advance of us will be instructive to thinking about both policy and economics in the years to come.
Yeah, we have 13
I think
trillion.
Japan.
Yeah, we have 13 trillion in negative yielding assets right now. And Tony, going back to our talk the other day about Italy, Italy is able to borrow on the short end in negative territory.
Yeah,
it's amazing, and that's Italy, right? And then and of course Germany is paying you quite considerably to hold their money. So look, a longer question on this. This would be a great topic for another show, is because there is a lot to dive into in it, though, is whether anything ought to really be done about it. That's why that was sort of getting my point about whether we need to be such a slave to, like, I understand the logic of the inflation target. I'm pro inflation targeting, but there is a sort of slavery to it, and thinking about it as a goal in and of itself. But if the economy is otherwise doing well and is being impacted by demographic changes, like if you go to Japan, it doesn't look or feel like an economy that's had slow growth for 2 decades. It looks like a highly developed, Western, materialistic economy. It doesn't look like it. Like if you lived there, that you would feel like things aren't great, And so, and it's because we have to readjust our thinking as economies do become more mature, not just as they become mature economies, older demographics, but also the stock of wealth in the economy, I think, has different dynamics. If you got a lot of Western European countries that are very well, I was just in Austria, and some other Western European countries last couple of weeks, and they're wealthy, and the growth hasn't been U.S. rates of growth. You don't feel like you're in a country that is having economic hardship.
That's a great point, Tony. And I would say one thing that I would add to that is that, look, we've had a lot of discussion in policy circles in the U.S. over the past, decade about, are we going to get back to 3% growth? And the reality is that people experience the economy on a per capita basis. They don't experience the economy on a how much is it growing. So, on some level, like, that's the headline number that people got used to. But to your point, does it matter? That's not clear.
Yeah. So there have been some questions about the, and I would love to look back into the BLS report of people unemployed or taking part-time jobs for economic reasons, which has steadily declined during the recovery, but hasn't gotten quite down to pre-crisis levels, but was pretty close. But people have a different view. They have this view that there are a lot of people taking second jobs to make ends meet, but it's not showing up in the data at all. It's actually showing the opposite.
Yeah, that kind of came out during the debates, the Democratic debates, where it came up that, there's X amount of people working in second and third jobs. But when you actually look at the data, it's actually lower than it was under the Obama administration.
Yeah, I think was that Bernie Sanders who said that? I didn't watch the debate. I think I just saw a tweet about it later.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys, why don't we take a break here, and then when we come back, why don't we take a couple of minutes just talking about changes at the ECB and where we think how things are going to change in Europe. We'll take a couple minutes on that, look at data that we have to look forward to next week, and then we'll call it a weekend. This is the HPS Macrocast, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back with the HPS Macrocast. We have Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners, Matt McDonald, my partner here at HPS. It was a surprise announcement we saw just the other day of IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde, a former finance minister for France. She's going to be the next head of the European Central Bank, the ECB, replacing whatever it takes Mario Draghi. That was kind of big news. And what Brendan, how are you? What do you expect that's going to mean for the ECB?
The markets certainly took it positively that she basically will continue the path that Draghi has started, and maybe even be a little more dovish. That's what the market's kind of the view.
I mean, she hasn't given any indications on this. It's just that other people are guessing that that she's a dove. I don't know that I know Christine Lagarde a little bit, and I don't know that I would make those presumptions about her. I think she's a pretty clear-headed person. I think she's going to be someone who's very data dependent and isn't going to go in with sort of preconceived views.
And it could be just the expectations that it was going to be a German. So the fact
that's true. It's a relief rally.
I will say one thing that I think is interesting about the Lagarde appointment is that she has more of a history as a politician, public figure, someone who is used to communicating to broad audiences, and I think that is I'm not sure that that's what people think of first when they think of central bank leadership, but it is super important, and just from a perspective of someone who is not who is used to that and understands how to navigate that public scrutiny, I think that would have a whether she ends up being more hawkish or more dovish, I think that there's an element of certainty into her being able to express what she's thinking that could be helpful for market watchers that they would welcome.
I think that's absolutely spot on. It's just a great point. That it presents both opportunities for her as a communicator at ECB and maybe advantages that Mario Draghi and his predecessors didn't have, and also some risk too, right? That's seen as political, but she's a really impressive woman and just really smart, talented, but we are going to have the two most important central banks now led not by economists but by lawyers. Which is interesting.
There's no math on the LSAT.
That's true. Someone who once took the LSAT, I can confirm that.
But it is a great point because the ECB press conference is much more market moving than the actual statement. Usually you kind of know what's coming, so it's those nuances that the head of the ECB provides that really what the market focuses on.
Well, we saw this with not too long ago with Jay Powell, is that finding your sea legs in terms of what you mean to say and what people hear it's an art, and it's I think it's true broadly. Tony, we see this in our work. I think it's true broadly at kind of the CEO and C-suite level, is that you're not really under scrutiny until you get into that big chair, and then it's a different game, and some people are prepared for it and some are not. And I think that's true with central banks too. And I think that, there are people who learn on the job, and I don't think that Lagarde is going to be learning that particular skill on the job. Not that she won't have challenges to face, but I think it's a comfort to markets that she's used to that scrutiny on a big stage.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember watching Ben Bernanke's first hearing or testimony, and he was very much a deer in the headlights, but he's someone that definitely grew into the job, and by the end he knew exactly what he was doing and was able to play the market as he wanted.
Yeah, and I would just say none of the people I can think of at either, maybe going back to Greenspan did some public commentating before he became Fed chair, but not really that much. It's hard to find either at the ECB or the Fed someone who has spoken publicly about sensitive economic issues than Christine Lagarde. So she's, so maybe she'll have, maybe make fewer mistakes, but it is a unique challenge to speak about your expectations about the economy and what your intentions are as a policymaker. And so, mistakes do happen. You do have to learn. I think even the best communicators have to learn on the job a little bit. And so we'll probably see some of that. But she's from a communication standpoint, I don't think anyone has ever been better prepared for it.
Right.
And so we'll see. And she's been through some of the challenges through, both at the state level and the international financial institution level during financial crises as well. So if we see one of those again, it's good to have someone with some experience at the helm. Brendan, do we have what are we looking for next week? I haven't even looked at what data we have.
Yeah, that's actually a good transition because we have a little data, but next week's really going to be dominated by Fed testimony. So we get the JOLTS data on Tuesday, and then the big one on Thursday on the data front is we get the CPI for June, and then on the Friday the PPI. But the real big up in Canada, the Bank of Canada has a rate decision, and while they're not expecting a cut, there's always a chance for one. But Jay Powell on Wednesday goes before the House Financial Services Committee for the Humphrey Hawkins testimony. So in this, you usually try to go up there and say as little as possible and answer questions that are more directed towards, someone's district than monetary policy. But with the market expecting a cut in July and then maybe a couple more throughout the year, Jay's going to have, in his stated testimony, he's going to have to probably address it. So the market will be paying close attention to this one. And then on the same day, we get the FOMC meeting minutes from the June meeting.
Well, we'll have a lot of that to talk about next week then.
And then the next day, he goes before the Senate on Thursday.
Right, for a reprise.
Yes.
Okay, Matt McDonald, Brendan Walsh, have a wonderful rest of the July 4th holiday weekend. Thanks for making time today on the Macro Policy Podcast. We'll be back next week. See you Friday.
Thanks for listening to the HPS Macrocast, produced by Hamilton Place Strategies in association with Markets Policy Partners. For more from Hamilton Place Strategies, follow us on Twitter at HPS Insight. For more from Markets Policy Partners, please visit marketspolicy.com.